In this section, we'll talk about what happens when things go bad after a transaction occurs and who needs to deal with it from your side, namely the shareholder's representative.
What's a shareholder representative and what are their responsibilities?
When you consummate a merger or an acquisition, there's a series of things like the reps and warranties and the escrow that survive after the merger that have to be dealt with. A person is responsible for this. That person is designated in the merger agreements as the shareholder representative. Now, oftentimes nothing much happens, and so there's not really any work that needs to be done. But when something goes wrong and there's a lot that has to be dealt with, it can often be an enormous amount of work. Let's say there's a lawsuit around the earnout, or let's say there's a claim against the escrow that has to be sorted out and forensic accounting has to be done on the company to figure out what's right and what's wrong. The buyer has a whole team of people in their legal department that's responsible for this. The seller doesn't exist anymore. The seller's been bought by the buyer. So somebody has to be responsible, and that's the shareholder's rep. Now, it used to be the case that oftentimes the shareholder's rep was one of the investors. It turns out that that's a really, really thankless job and a situation where the investor is doing work and doing activity that if there's multiple investors, including obviously the founders, that shareholder's rep is now spending a lot of time for free doing something that, while it benefits all the shareholders, is really a very thankless task.
So the shareholder's representative is not a paid position?
Correct. In the context of where somebody that's a shareholder of the company does it, it's rarely a paid position. Instead, somebody raises their hand, or more likely, everybody else steps back, and the one person doesn't get step back in time gets nominated to be the shareholder's rep. This has changed recently. Over the last couple of years, my partner, Jason Mendelson, who we all talked to earlier, came up with the idea of creating a company to actually be the shareholder's rep. And there's now a company called Shareholder Representative Services that exists to play this role. They do get paid a small amount of money for handling this, and then reimbursed for all the fees around it. But what it does is it eliminates the need for an existing shareholder to play that role in the situations where something comes up.